really important that if our logos or I think it's really important that we stress that farming of the future is really about this multidisciplinary approach. We're working with farmers every day, and even some of the best farmers, our best farmers, but arguably some of the best farmers in the country, they're completely confused by all these different things that are being thrown at them at once. It's hard enough to grow your crop from start to finish, but now we have to take into account the health of our soils, how our microorganisms in the field are really starting to affect our plants, how our pesticides and fertilizers are affecting our microorganisms, how all of this integrated mess of confusion is going to lead to the enhanced efficiencies that'll allow us to produce the most bushels per pound of nitrogen. So it's not about just throwing nitrogen in the field anymore and getting a yield increase. It's about being able to collect the most dollars per acre that we invest in. So it's becoming real challenging. We should probably even add a financial guy to the team, right?
But I think the biggest thing, that I can appreciate about you guys and kind of this group we're looking to work together on is just the transparency behind it. There's so many companies out there like involved in this, and half of them don't even know what they're doing or what they're selling. And so that's really the biggest thing is like just being transparent with the producer, with the farmer, and being able to help them on their farm. That's the biggest thing too, is like I know all three of us would show up at a farm and help a guy out at his farm instead of just over the phone and selling him something like that. I mean, that's not what we're after at all. We're trying to kind of complete that transparency aspect, and I think that's where we can really have the benefit, the upper hand over other companies that are maybe in this space, but lack something, whether it's knowledge or just that will to go to somebody's farm and actually help them right then and there.
Yeah, it's really important. We like farmers and we like farming. And I don't want to pick on any particular companies or anything, but you're starting to see gigantic multinational companies that are they're just profiteering and they're taking advantage of the confusion that we're seeing in the market today. Knowledge is supposed to be free.
Supposed to be. That's our goal with making this content is knowledge is power, and getting that knowledge out there, and not charging for the knowledge per se, but the implementation side of it is where we can help as well. But yeah, the guys need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that's going to be the first step that they need to overcome. And that's what our goal is with these videos and helping guys understand that.
Yeah, and I think it helps expand the entire industry. I don't think knowledge is a threat at all. The more these farmers know and the more they understand, the more they realize how they can use different things and get more out of their money. And that just makes, multidisciplinary groups like ours even more essential to the market.
Yep. You guys do any work in the UK?
Yes. I haven't for about 8 years now, but yeah, definitely. When I was based over there in 2015, 2016, absolutely. A lot of turf grass, a lot of potatoes, a lot of some vineyards. I was just getting into vineyards and orchards in the Channel and in France right when visa ran out. So I ended up coming back to the States, but then did a lot of work in Ireland with some of the eco villages and on an award-winning farm in southern Iowa or Iowa, and Iowa too, in Ireland, but produce, heavy produce farming. And everywhere I've gone, I've kind of done the same sort of staple, showing them how to really farm their own microbes and essentially create their own solution that's endemic and indigenous from their own system. So they really can cut out all the marketing BS of bugs in a jug, which aren't, at least back then, they weren't as fashionable over there yet. There was very few things that were on the market in the biological realm. So I was able to really, they have such a deeper history abroad than we do here in the States. And, we're talking 10 plus generations of just families handing down these acres to, their next of kin. And so there was always this reverence for the old ways and old knowledge that was also contained within a lot of these growers who I'd work with in these multi-generational farms. So it was always a really good experience to introduce this other language of biology and farming microbes and that sort of thing in hopes that they would carry that forth. And to this day, I don't know of an operation, even golf courses that I worked with, that has given up their efforts of making bioreactors. Like they still do it. They still believe in it. It's such a necessary recycling process of a system that they want to do it. They feel like they've seen so many other benefits, and this goes beyond yield. They just seen such a different sort of vibrancy of health in their system. And so yeah, it's like they've taken on another crop in essence. And that goes for every producer I work with in the country as well, be it conventional or organic. They still believe in the biology. Like they've seen it, they believe it. And part of what I do with a microscope is let's get up really close and let's see for ourselves. And I'm very empirical that way. I want to see it. If the product says it's algae and I look at it in the microscope and I don't see any algae, I have a hard time endorsing that as an algal product. And that's not picking on any companies in particular, but I using just the observation tool that a microscope is really what I base my approach with everybody I work with. Like let's see it for ourselves to believe it. Let's not just
Well, that's full transparency at its finest.
it's full transparency. I can't get behind something that says it's there and it's not. There is as we all would imagine, there is an awful lot of label dressing in the world of probably human pharmaceuticals as well as in agriculture. Cut that. But anyway, I think that we are the three of us. What's really neat about us is we're very adaptable. So we don't just pigeonhole ourselves and say, well, we're just regenerative and we're regenerative. That's a great word and it's a great concept that we're all still talking about and really tumbling around of what does that actually mean and what does that look like? Because at the end of the day, these people have these private enterprises that they're trying to make money so they can have livelihood. And we're trying to support that and not go in there and say, you got to throw all this knowledge, this farming knowledge away. We're showing them more options. Our three companies, we're showing other tools of the trade. And then we're trying to pull that together into a way that they can start supplementing their system. That was a really long answer to your question, though.
No,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Now,
UK.
I think you've raised a lot of good points. First off, a wise old man once told me, never believe what you read on that label.
Mhm.
But more seriously though, I'm tired of hearing the word monocropping. We've all three of us, we've been in fields that have been corn on corn. I mean, for longer than any of us have been alive. And those things are not monocrops by any means. I mean, just the wealth of diversity and life that's below your boots while you're walking these fields is amazing. So I think, you with your microscope really taught me that. And, when you start to see the adoption of different biological techniques in growing, we're really seeing it come. The success stories are really starting to come from the cattle guys and, the pig farmer. And I think they're just, the life in the soil is much more animal than it is plant. There's no light there to do photosynthesis. So these things behave, they move, they establish just like animals. So a lot of those cattlemen are actually the ones that have been. They find this very easy. It's just part of what they've always done. So I think our challenge will become teaching the typical corn soybean guy, that they are also farming animals, and they were just stepping on them all this time.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
true.
this is cool.
I think that what we embody with our approach, utilizing biology to, making it commercially available to the grower to extract it, to wash that biology into a solution, and then apply that to the field at these low rates, these ridiculously low rates of a pound to 2 pounds per acre. I think that what it promotes ultimately is this whole total fertility. We're promoting all five super kingdoms of life instead of just plant or plant and animal if we've got livestock. We are promoting bacteria, we're promoting fungi, and then the last of the fifth super kingdoms, protista. And lo and behold, four out of those five kingdoms, this being plant kingdom, four out of those five we're growing in our composts and in our bioreactors and our biological efforts, our biological farming. We're actually farming and cultivating those organisms and reintroducing them, re-plugging them into the system and promoting everything at once instead of just a plant. And so it is very like a polyculture approach still. Like Rob said, we're still working with monocultures, but we're amending with a polyculture.
And that's one
Breeds
of the,
resiliency.
I think one of the things that you taught me through that polyculture technique is carbon. You
Mhm.
know, I'm a plant physiologist. Crops and agronomy is all I've ever done. I have advanced degrees in it. And I never really thought about carbon as a nutrient or even thought about where carbon came from. I just knew we didn't want photorespiration so we could fix more carbon. But one of the things your microscope shows me, organic matter, carbon cycling, it has nothing to do with humic acid. It has everything to do with life. We are carbon. Worms are carbon. Bacteria, carbon. So just being more aware of where my carbon's going and where it comes from, photosynthesis, how to maximize the efficiency of the plant, maximize the sequestration of carbon, and then support that life so we don't kill our carbon. You know, where does carbon go when it dies? CO2, back into the air.
Or humus.
Humus. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, it's such an enigma. It's the thing that I think that agriculturalists have been talking about since the printed text in the late 18th century. When we go back to those sort of uh, journals, they were talking about humus or black mold, as they would call it, or topsoil. And it's this thing that we still haven't, I don't think science has really fully defined it, but I mean, humus is a molecular construct of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen that's bound together. And like I have oftentimes said to large groups that I speak to is we have two choices, be a healthy soil or not. We either are going to capture our carbon and well, we're either going to lose our carbon and it's going to go back into the atmosphere as CO2, or we're going to capture it and we're going to turn it into humus colloids again. And that's a digestive process. It's an artifact of functional biology. And something that our lab does is we do a humus substance test that's very basic. It's a colorimetric test that gives us a grade, but it still gives us an idea of whether or not at the end of the year, when we look at kind of the report card of the whole soil, we either grew humus or we lost humus. And if we lost humus, we need to start asking more questions and investigating why did we lose humus? Because really, if we're applying these life forms that are supposed to be capturing carbon and humifying it and packaging it and making it into more complex structures that are stable and they should stay in our soil, we should be seeing that humus continue to gradually go up. And we do. And we put it up against, pivot check, pivot corners, and we put it up against checks to kind of really monitor that and prove to ourselves that we're actually seeing that increase. But this is something that I think is very important that we should continue to talk about in these agricultural circles. And I doubt in my lifetime, in our lifetime, we're ever going to get around the outside of it. But humus is this big thing that I think that ultimately we have the opportunity to promote in addition to simultaneously promoting our crops. And that's why it's like this approach it's about growing plants and soil simultaneously. And so, you know, looking at expectations with a new customer, it's always, yeah, we've got yield, we've got our bottom line for sure. But let's also look at our soil at the end of this year and the second year, third year, and compare it to our baselines and seeing where we started. And lo and behold, we see that we are growing soil as we successively do this year after year.
No, that's a great point. Just to hit on that point a little bit, Zach, when you're doing kind of your baseline testing and doing that year after year testing, what should guys look for to test? What type of testing procedures are they doing? What are they testing for to gather those baselines? Just general ideas, but instead of just a standard ammonium acetate soil test, I mean, what are guys really wanting? What should they test?
I listen to what guys trust, and some go traditional Malic 3 testing still with their soils. Others have really taken to the Haney tests. Others have taken to the PLFA tests. Some people really pop for the really high dollar DNA sequencing tests, the biomakers type stuff. And I'm all for it. I think any sort of feedback loop is necessary to look at. And I get lab results from all over the country from labs I've never even heard of because that's who the farmer uses, and that's great. What we offer is direct microscopy, and there are other labs in the country of people who do it. That don't let me pretend that I'm the only one. But we do direct microscopy. We do a humus test where we're just basically looking at the humus substances in total. We're not looking at fulvic or humic. However, we work with affiliate labs that do that. But humus, I think, is so critical. And then on the energy side of it, we do something that's a little foo-foo, and we look at paramagnetism. And that's where, like, if you've ever had people that talk about rock dusts and basalts and andesites and using things like that, there's a way we can measure it. There's a device that we use to measure that. And I am a firm believer in the energy also of soil. And that's what paramagnetism kind of gives us an idea of, not to go too deep into paramagnetism. But we do kind of unconventional stuff in-house. I think that a baseline of a bioassay is a great start because we can see what essentially the bottom of your food chain looks like. And then from there, we can talk about what it is we can do to, I guess, fill that gap that's missing in the food web. What oftentimes I see in production soils, especially from those who have not even taken a step in a biological direction, is they kind of have the bottom of the food chain in place, a half of it anyway. They'll have their bacteria component, which I call the rabbits, the bunnies of the system. But then their second and third rung of the food chain, which are your foxes, your wolves, things like that, on a microscopic level, your protista, your nematodes, there's none of that. And so if you have nothing to eat the rabbits, all that fertility gets kind of stuck in the rabbit and it doesn't pass back up the food chain in a nutrient cycling fashion. And so when we identify that that gap is missing in the food web, in that bottom of the food chain, that's what we really go after in our supplementation into the system. And we still farm, we still use fertilizers. We're no-till, right? So we still use chemicals, or I like tillage too. So maybe we don't use tillage, or maybe we use tillage and we don't use chemicals. But either way, we're managing disturbance by administering our biological component. And then I like to pack a lunch with that biology too, because we are producers. So I really lean toward foods, such as amino acids and sea minerals and things like that, that can help boost everything.
So let me back you up a little bit. Guys that want to start on this journey and do this, or guys that are a couple years into it, but they want to get this biological baseline that you speak of. It's as simple as they can put their soil in a bag and send it to you, and you can do all that stuff in your lab.
Absolutely. So if we're not passing it on to a chemistry lab ourselves, an affiliate lab, we just ask for the top 0 to 3 inches of the soil. Now, if it's going to this lab, they do 0 to 6 inches. Okay, we want to take that into consideration. And we do cores at 0 to 6 inches. Or maybe this lab does 0 to 8 inches. Okay, well, we want. So I try to really plan out accordingly so that when we receive the sample, we split it in half. We take our half and we send the other half to the affiliate lab to do the chemistry. And I love chemistry. I'm a huge fan of CEC, base saturation, pH. Those are metrics that I really look at in the function of the soil very traditionally.
That's
Yeah, trying
awesome.
to keep all those samples consistent so that you can directly compare them to one another.
Exactly.
That
So
makes a lot of sense.
that's one of the biggest pieces to this whole puzzle is the biological side, and for a guy to be able to grab his soil, send it to your lab, and you can run all those tests, get them a baseline, or give them a year after year approach to what we're doing. Is it working? Or what you're doing, is it working? Rob, your perspective more on the plant side of it, getting into testing. You get into sap testing, testing, or what type of testing are you looking for, and what can kind of help from the actual crop growth side of things? What would you look for when helping a farmer?
I'm totally into testing, and but the thing is, you got to give me an objective. I go through countless tests trying to interpret them with our clients and farmers, and I enjoy it. It's like a problem solving exercise. But you can't just blindly test these fields. You're driving me nuts. You bring me a report that's about 150 pages long, and it's not ground truth, if that makes any sense. So what I instruct everyone is to have, well, first the consistency, just like Zach was saying, we need tests that we can compare to the test before, but we need an objective. Don't ever bring me a test that doesn't have an objective. What were we trying to figure out? Was it a problem? Was it carbon in the soil? Was it a nutrient deficiency or nutrient tie up because of a bad ratio somewhere? So it's important for you to give me a range of samples. I don't need replicated samples, but you should take replicated samples. You pool all your reps that were in that treatment, so to speak, or that looked the same way to all the reps that looked the other way. So most of the time it's looking at poor plant performance. So give me a pooled bag of data from the poor performing and a pooled bag of data from the good performing. And then we can start to look at the differences between the two because you're the one who ground truthed the.
Yeah, I've got 30 slides or so, but I just feel like you and I can just really get 3 hours of good discussion and interaction because that's the whole point of what I think
Oh,
we're
yeah.
is
Yeah, I
just
agree.
is a real workshop of dialogue.
Definitely. I'll be dialogue based and I'll make sure I have some slides prepared by Tuesday.
I might
But
do my smart ass slide where I just put dollar signs on the slide and
because
say,
I'm
well,
running
this
out
is
of
what
time
you all
today.
want to see. This is what everybody wants to see. So here it is.
I cut
So,
out
but
a little
yeah,
bit about
if
that,
you're
so
if
I
you're
missed
back
that.
online, Blake, just make sure we're comparing tests, apples to apples, and make sure there's something that because the test is all of these tests are ultimately meaningless. There's not like one score that's going to be, oh, that's good or oh, that's bad. So it's important that you are determining what's good and what's bad, and then we can tell you why. And but yeah, you should see, particularly with the SAP tests. The different tests will give you different snapshots into the time and the problem and how the plant's mobilizing it. But I mean, you should see some of these reports that I get, and they're so long, and nobody knows how to interpret them. And another, I'll point out with SAP tests, just because you don't have all 17 nutrients in the SAP all the time doesn't mean they're supposed to be there all in the SAP all the time. So none of that's really well documented. So it's important that you ground truth all of these things. And then from a more soil traditional perspective, I'll come at it from the large agronomy side. That's where I spend most of my days, or in just large acre farms where the planters are hitting the furrow. But in these places, no matter what soil test you're looking at, when that carbon content starts to go up, when your humic or your biology or whatever you want to define it as that goes up, my agronomic problems go down. I get higher nutrient use efficiency. I have less pest problems. I have more uniformity. That gives me better harvests. It actually helps me drive faster down the field. It gives me more action out of my pesticides, my herbicides in particular. So it helps to balance everything. So that's an important character to look at. And then it's a lot more to do. It's not necessarily the amount, but those ratios are pretty important too. Because look at Mulder's chart or von Liebig's barrel, and they really interact with each other. 1034 is a great example. It's a high soluble phosphorus, and it'll totally knock off the balance of phosphorus to zinc, phosphorus to manganese. So you really start to see some interactions and antagonisms. But calcium and magnesium ratio is very important. Calcium sulfur ratio is very important. And then let's take it even a step back on a macro level. And I think Zach will corroborate this as well. Man, we've gotten more of a yield response by using things like frilled elemental sulfur or even calcium carbonate limestone than you could ever imagine. If your pHs are all wonky and out of control in those fields, you're going to have a problem with everything you apply. So just like the macronutrients, nitrogen gives you a bigger response than zinc. Your macro problems in that field are big. I could have my new fertility program tight, and if you don't have any irrigation, yeah, those nutrients aren't gonna help you, or precipitation in those dry land areas. But similar pH, if you don't have your pH in check, nothing's gonna help you. And so it's important to just go down the list, uh, solve the big problems first, and work your way down.
Well, that's great. Great insight.